The purpose of this lesson is to show you how to put a buffer around a shape. What a buffer is a boundary that is outside of a shape. So you can have the buffer around a polygon, around a line, around a point. So for example, around a polygon, you may want to know everybody that lives within 5 miles of a certain county, so that buffer would be a 5-mile buffer. And of course the polygon is not a smooth shape, so it would be a 5-mile buffer that conforms to the shape of the county. Or you might want to put a buffer around a road. I want to know 150 feet on each side of the center line of the road, and that's all we really have. Remember, a line, which would be a road, doesn't have a width to it. All it has is where the center line of the road is. I want to know what's on. I want to buffer 150 feet on each side of the road to make sure if we have a spill on the road that it's not going to contaminate a river or something. Or you might want to buffer around a point. So a point might be a city. If we're zoomed way out at a state level, a point could be a college campus, and that's the one we're going to use here for our explanation. Or it could be any other thing where a student lives. Lots of things that you can use for a buffer. So we've got these buffers, and we're going to show you 3 ways of buffering. We're going to do a single buffer both around a polygon and around a point, just to show you how a single buffer works. We're going to do a single buffer around a point, but when buffers overlap, that they dissolve together and form into one buffer instead of being 2 discrete circles there. And the third type of buffering we'll do will be multiple ring buffers around a point, showing you if you're 15 miles away, 20 miles away, 25 miles away, what's encompassed in that. And we'll probably do a dissolve on those buffers also. When we do buffers, they create new layer files, so once you do the buffer, you don't have to have the original data there any longer. All you have to have is the buffer information, but this is going to create a new shape file for us. So on the screen right now, you're seeing a map of the state of Kentucky. We have outlined the state, which is one layer. We've put the counties in, and that's a different layer, and we left them at a greenish color, the counties. And finally, we put on the campus locations of the KCTCS campuses, and those are sort of a brownish orange color diamond, as you can see them here. We can zoom in if we need to look at where we're at, and so you can see I've zoomed into the Jefferson County area. I'm going to just go back to where I was at previous to that. So the first thing I want to do is put a buffer around these county boundaries. So I'm going to go to the toolbox. I'm going to go to Analysis Tools. I'm going to go to Proximity, and I'm going to then double-click on Buffer. And you open up the following window. What layer do you want to create a buffer about? What's the input feature? We use the pull down here. And initially I'm going to say county boundaries, just because I want you to see what a buffer would look like around a polygon. Takes a moment. Usually when you open up a feature, it takes a few moments for the data to install, the feature to install, so we're waiting for that feature to install. Okay, it is installed. The next window that I'm looking at is where do you want to save your information. So I'm going to open up that folder, and I've got a folder called Video Lessons. This is not part of my normal GIS structure, because really what we're going to do here I'm not going to keep, so I've got this folder called Video Lessons. You need to make sure you keep your data in an appropriate location. So I'm going to call this County. And you've got to be careful. You cannot use a space in the name, so I'm just going to call it County, because that's what we're going to buffer around. Well, maybe I'll call it County and use an underscore and call it Buffer, just so I know what it is a little bit better when I want to delete it. And we'll say that's going to be the name. You can see that's changed in the storage location. You need to tell it what units to use as your buffer, and I'm going to use miles for my buffer. And then it wants to know what linear distance do you want to use for your buffer, and I'm going to choose 10 miles is going to be my buffer distance. So I'm going to buffer around each county 10 miles. And I'm going to say OK. Those are the only features I'm going to give it to at this point. Say OK. A little dialog working window shows up here. And you can see it's executing the buffer. it will be the faster the computer, the faster the buffering goes. Also, the less information that it has to buffer about, the quicker it goes. So since I told it not to dissolve this buffer, and we'll look at that in a few moments, it should go quicker than if I gave it the same buffer and told it to dissolve, but it takes more calculations to do that than it would the other one. And there you can see it's completed. It's a little hard to tell what it's done because everything's laying on top of each other, and that's one of the reasons we would do a dissolve. And I'm going to just come in here and make this hollow so we can see it a little bit better. And there you can see all the lines buffering around each county boundary. And let's zoom in a little bit just to see it a little bit better. We'll zoom here around Jefferson County. And you can see all the overlapping buffers I'm showing up there. So you can see the buffer, like here's a county boundary, and this would be a buffer with that county boundary, and this buffer here is probably with this county boundary here. And so you can see all this overlapping buffers. And it doesn't make really good sense, but I just want you to see that you can buffer around a polygon if you need to. And remember, you can also buffer around a line. We're not going to worry about showing you the line, but it's similar to what we just did here. I'm going to get rid of that layer because I don't really need it. So I'm just going to say remove that layer. And I'm going to go back and open up the buffer point again and make a new buffer. The input feature this time is going to be the college campuses. And again, I need to tell it where to save it, but I don't want to put it back up in my normal saving area. So let's just call this College 1. And we'll save that. Again, we're going to do this in miles, but that's what we're used to working in. And let's do a 20-mile buffer about each college campus. So the center, the point will be the center, and then we'll have a radius of 20 miles about it. So let's say OK there. I did that one pretty quickly for us. And you can see that we've got overlapping ovals here. And the reason they're ovals and not perfect circles is the projection that I used on the map. But you can see there's also areas that there's not a college campus within 20 miles of certain areas in Kentucky. But most of Kentucky, we have a college campus within a straight line distance, not a road distance, a straight line distance of 20 miles. Well, let's go back and modify that buffer that we just did. So I'm going to leave that one there, but I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to double click on the buffer. There's our window again. I'm still going to use college campuses as our input feature. Again, I'm going to tell it where to save it. We'll call this one College 2. So it's just different than the first one's name. Again, I'm going to do miles. I'm going to do 20 miles again. But down here, a little farther in the window, something we didn't really worry about, is there's an option called dissolve type, and we've got none. I'm going to use the pull down, and I'm going to say dissolve all. And what that means is when one buffer is going to lay on top of another buffer, it's going to dissolve that line where it lays on top of it and just make it into a bigger polygon on its own right. Instead of having one oval laying on top of an oval, we're going to have now the outer boundaries of both of those ovals is all we're going to see, and not the part that lays on top of each other. So we're going to say all for our dissolve type, and we're going to say OK. So it's executing my buffer here. This should be a more intense command than the previous one was. And now you can see on the screen that we have areas that are all connected where every place is within at least 20 miles of a college campus. Then the green areas that we're seeing outside of those connected areas is areas that we don't have a college campus within 20 miles. So as we look at this, we'll zoom in a little bit here. So this area in northern Kentucky, we've got just parts of each of these counties that we don't have a campus. There's a little spot over here that we don't have a campus within 20 miles. So you can see how dissolved buffering is different than what we did with buffering where they overlapped. So we're going to turn off that layer also. We'll still leave it there. But we want to look at now, let's look at a multiple ring buffer where we can give different radiuses, and then we'll color code those different radiuses to see what's going on there. So we're going to do multiple ring buffer, so I'm clicking on that one. I'm going to use the same input feature, which will be our campuses. I'm going to change my storage location. We're going to call this College 3. And it wants to know the distances that we're going to use. So we put the first distance in, let's say 15 miles. And we'll put the next distance in, let's say it's going to be 25 miles. And the third distance, let's say it's going to be 35 miles. And we can do as many of these as we want. We need to tell what units we're doing this in. And again, we want to do it in miles. And so you can see that's changed to miles. We're going to dissolve this just like we did before. So we'll have the 10-mile rings dissolved together, the 15-mile rings dissolved together, the 25-mile rings dissolved together, and the 35-mile rings dissolved together. And let's see what we get for results. So we're going to dissolve all. We have, again, the options of either none or all. And this is a more complicated calculation, so we'll see how quickly that calculation can be done. We're going to say OK. And you see it's doing buffer ring 1, so it does the same calculation for one buffer, and then it's got to do the calculation for the second buffer, and then the calculation for the third buffer. So it's doing that same type of calculation 3 times. And you can see it says 100%. Let's see if there's more things. It's merging the rings now. That because we talked to do dissolve, that's what it means by merging the rings, as you can see on the screen. It's thinking about that. It's got to do that merging the rings 3 times. So now you can see it's doing the dissolved overlapping on the boundaries. And definitely this is a bigger calculation. And there we go. It's completed it. Notice it shows different colors for the different distances. So if I look over here in my legend, 15 is sort of a turquoise color, 25 is sort of a magenta color, I guess, and 35 is maybe a deep rose color, or sort of a pinkish color. And when you do that, we find there's only 2 little spots in Kentucky that we don't have a campus within 35 miles. Obviously, if we turn the 35 off, we have quite a few areas that may not have a campus within 25, and there's lots of areas that would not have a campus within 15 miles. So you can see different distances. Again, these are not drive distances, these are linear distances. So you can see the 15-mile buffer. You can see the results of the 25-mile buffer, which obviously includes everything that's in the turquoise buffer, plus what's in the magenta color. And then you can see the 35-mile buffer. So you can see how buffering can be used, or how it can be done. And then these are shape files, but remember we had to give a storage location. These can stand on their own. I could get rid of the college campus dots there. They don't have to be there any longer because I have a new shape file there. We don't have to have the county boundaries. And one of the things I might do here is, if I was creating a real map for a real purpose, I might move the county boundaries up. Well, that's the state boundary. I got to first make the county boundary have no color before I can move it up, or else it'll lay on top of everything. So there we go. Give it no color. I'm going to move it up underneath the state boundary there. And now you can see the county boundaries. If I zoom in just a little bit, you can see the county boundaries. You can see the buffer results. You can see the state boundary. And now you have some details that you can work off of. So this is how you do buffering.